Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Adoption Happy Hour brought to you by NAAP. We are the National Association of Adoptees and Parents, where it is our mission to unify the adoption community and elevate our diverse voices by promoting dialogue, understanding, and healing through education, awareness, and connections. I'm Marcie Keithley, your host for the evening, along with Jennifer. Beth is visiting her biological family for a couple of days, so she won't be joining us tonight, but we want to welcome each and every one of you this evening. Just wanted to mention that it's Derby weekend here in Kentuckiana, thus the hat. I don't know if anybody else has theirs on tonight, but I know last year we had a couple. But yeah, today is Oaks Day, which the Phillies run, and then tomorrow's the Kentucky Derby. So that's why I've got my hat on this evening. So if any of you are watching us on TV, it's crazy down here, just absolutely nuts. But anyway, we're going to get started. Jennifer, you've got some announcements before we go. All right. We want to remind everybody this is a public meeting with no guarantee that information or identity is confidential. Portions of this event are recorded and may be shared in our private happy hour group on Facebook and on our YouTube channel. So if you don't follow us on Facebook, please do under Adoption Happy Hour. That's where Ann's replay will be. Please remain on mute, raise your hand on screen or the virtual hand to be recognized. You may post your questions or comments in the chat. If you are experiencing a serious mental health event or suicidal thought, please contact a licensed professional or the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline by dialing 988.
And let me
what else do we have, Jen?
Just want to share the programs really quick. Of course, it's happy hour tonight. So third Friday will be happy hour, first and third Fridays. And then we have First Families that's on the second Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Dr. Joyce will be May, I think it's 14th. It's a Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. And Danielle Gaudet, Self-Love Essentials for the Adoption Constellation, is on the last Thursday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And just to let you know, it is currently up and available for registration. Next happy hour will be Jen Matthews. She is the host of the podcast Conversations About Adoption. She is going to tell her story and then how she used a podcast and listening to the stories of others to heal herself. So registration is open for that. That's it.
Anything else, Jen?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Okay, well, at this time, I would like to welcome Ann Mikeska to Adoption Happy Hour. Welcome, Ann.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Just going to read a little bit about Ann before we begin. She was born during the baby scooped era in a Salvation Army Booth maternity home for unwed mothers in Omaha. Her mother was forced to relinquish 3 days after her birth. She was given to her adoptive family through Lutheran Family Services at 12 weeks old after spending several weeks in an unknown location. In 2018, Ann discovered her entire biological family through DNA testing and her internet searches. However, despite this reunion, legal constraints prevent Ann from obtaining her original birth certificate, the factual documentation of her birth. After moving 18 times in 30 years, well, you'll have to tell us about that, spending almost 10 of those years in Japan due to her husband's Navy career, she currently resides in Northern Virginia with her husband and rescue pup. She is a mother of 4 adult children and Gigi to her favorite human, her 3-year-old grandson. She's currently working on her historical fiction novel set in a maternity home in the 60s. Motivated by her personal experience, she channels her advocacy through active participation as a team member of the Virginia Adoptee Rights Alliance. Additionally, she dedicates her time to volunteer with the Adoptee Rights Coalition, the ARC, who focuses on educating legislators, the adoption community, and the public on crucial issues concerning adult adoptees. And again, she presently resides in Northern Virginia with her husband and is deeply committed to the cause of ensuring equal treatment under the law for all Commonwealth residents. Let's welcome Ann to Adoption Happy Hour, everybody. Good to see you again, Ann.
Thanks, Marcie. I know, long time no see for a lot of you.
How about that?
Oh, hold on. I'm trying to do 2 monitors and I'm not good at this. Okay. So to start. I have a helper.
You're good. Go ahead and start whenever you're ready.
Wait, do I have screen sharing? Okay. So everybody can see that? Oh, cool. All right, so as Marcie said, I was born in a Salvation Army home for unwed mothers. My mom was sent away because her dad was a deacon in a Southern Baptist church, and we couldn't possibly bring such shame onto the family. So I found everybody in 2018, and it has been a roller coaster on steroids ever since. I, for all intents and purposes, have a Hallmark reunion. Like I know everybody eventually welcomed me, but it's still been super hard. All right, slide. So these pictures were taken 2 weeks apart. That is my biological parents on the left at their wedding. That is me at 5 months old. So they married. He was gone when she found out she was pregnant 2 weeks after he left for Vietnam, and was sent away, and they married 5 days after he returned. And I had been with my adopted parents for less than 2 months at that point. And according to my dad, although I'm not trying to believe him, he said that he did call and try to get me back, and was told it was impossible. And my mom is unaware of that. So, in my non-identifying information, it said that my mom was Italian. She was 19. She was one of many siblings, had triplet sisters who were 12. Which was interesting. So when I got pregnant each time, I was always like happy when I did the ultrasound and there was only one baby in there. So let's see, I always knew I was adopted. My parents told us, I mean, I don't remember being told. We got my brother when he was like 3 days old. I was 2. I was adopted due to infertility. They had tried for 5 years to get pregnant unsuccessfully, sought fertility treatment, still unsuccessful, so they settled on adopting. And they used to joke that they special ordered me because they asked for a baby girl that had dark hair and light eyes. So I was like a special order at McDonald's. I always had a difficult relationship with my mom from the time I was little. I think she loved me the best she could, but she struggled because I was not the child she wanted. Fortunately for her, my brother was more in tune with her. I was close to my dad. He had serious health issues though from the time I was 5 or 6. He could not work for long periods of my childhood. My mom was his primary caregiver, so we grew up pretty much in poverty from the time I was in 1st grade, which was a huge struggle. He passed away in his sleep in 2002, and then in 2009, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She was living in Illinois. We were living in Virginia Beach at the time. We brought her out there. And for the last 6 months of her life, I was her primary caregiver. It was a horrifically long, painful death. And when she died, I spiraled. I spiraled horribly. My husband probably was, but and it was very unexpected because I had what I would consider a more normal grief when my dad died. I was not expecting to lose it when my mom died, but you know, in hindsight, I think I was mourning the loss of 2 moms. The mom I was never allowed to even, you know, recognize as a loss. So that was rough. And then life got pretty good for a while. And then I was visiting a friend in Germany, and her husband had just got his DNA results. And we're looking at him, and I'm like, oh, wow, I should do that. I want to see how Italian I am. So I ordered a 23andMe from Germany, and it was waiting on me when I got home. take the test. Eventually it took me a little bit to take it. And then I was driving my daughter back from Texas Tech University back to Virginia for the summer. And she was opening up my email for something and she's like, Mom, your 23andMe results came in. I'm like, cool. Open them up. Let's see how Italian we are. Because we were very Italian. And she opens it up and she's like, it says you have no Italian. You're like 98%, or it was 99.9% like Irish, German, and English. There was nothing. And I'm like, how is that possible? And then she's like all upset because she's like, I tell everybody I'm Italian. I'm like, so, but then she said, Mom, it says DNA relatives. Well, back in 2017, there weren't a lot of people who were matching with relatives. The commercials were not advertising that they matched with relatives. And I had no idea that they matched with relatives. So she clicks on it and she's like, there's a whole lot of people you're related to. I started physically shaking. I ran off the road. We were right by Texarkana. Thank God there was an exit. And we sat in there and I went into like a barbecue restaurant for like 3 hours because it took me that long to calm down. Just scrolling through these names of people I was related to that in a million years I never thought I'd be able to find. My closest match was probably a third cousin once removed. But I have a friend who's an amazing genealogist. So I give her this information. And in the middle of like the next day, I get from that same cousin, I get a message saying, hey, I'm looking for a nephew that was put up for adoption. And I'm like, I don't know anything. I'm adopted. And she goes, well, let me see if I can help you. So she talks to her mom, who talks to her aunt, who talks to her great aunt. Anyway, they went through like 10 people. And they came back with, oh, there was a Paul Royal who had triplet daughters, which is important, that moved to California in the 70s. So I'm like, huh. So my friend gets on, and by the end of the day, she found pictures of the triplets that their house burned down. We had the whole list of that there's 8 siblings. One of them was 19. Ironically, her name is Ann. So I was like, well, that's craziness. So we look, we do the internet sleuthing. She has no kids. She's never been married. So then at that point, I'm like, something bad may have happened, who knows what I was a result from. I don't want to like destroy her life. So then I just sat on it for months. And then the same friend said, just take an ancestry test. We're not 100% sure, it's that family. So I take an ancestry test and I was turned 50 that year. And the results come back, and the youngest son of that 8-person sibling set is my highest match, my Uncle Lenny. So I'm like, oh yeah, we're right. So like 3 days later, my daughters confessed that they sent Uncle Lenny a message under my account without me knowing. So don't give your kids your password is my recommendation when you're doing DNA searches. So they had just said, hey, we're trying to figure out how we're related and on and on. And, he's like, I don't know. Very close. He goes, you're as close as my nephew. And I don't know who you are. So I was like, stop, let me take over. So I took over and I just said, I'm adopted. And he was like, what do you know? And so I told him and he's like, well, Ann would have been 19. And I said, yeah. He's like, there's no way it's Ann. I said, maybe something happened. He's like, no, it's not Ann. I guarantee it's not Ann. So I'm like, okay. So he's like, let me call you back in a couple of days. I'm going to make some phone calls. So he calls back and he says, I'm pretty sure it's my oldest sister. I've been talking to my wife. I remember her going away to secretary school when I was in 3rd grade. But I know she was back by the end of May because my sister Ann graduated from junior college and there's pictures of her at the graduation. I said, well, I was born in the middle of May, so she probably could have been home by then. So he's like, he said, when I talked to her, she was so angry at him, like, how could you accuse me of that? I'm not that kind of girl, on and on. So he's like, she's tenderhearted. I can't push her. I don't know what to do. And I said, you know what? I don't want to ruin anybody's life. I appreciate you talking to me. And he was like, I'm happy to meet you. So I'm like, okay, that's awesome. So then he calls me like 2 days later, and he's like, you need to sit down. And I said, okay. And he said, no, I mean, sit down. And I said, okay. And he said, my brother-in-law just called back, and my oldest sister's husband, and told me there was a child that we gave up. And I said, we? He said, yeah, my sister is your mom, and she's married to your dad. And they've been married since October 1968. And I said, I was born in May of 68. He said, I know. And he goes, and there's a lot of guilt and a lot of shame. And he said, and I don't know if she's ever going to be ready to meet you. So I'm like, great. So I let it go for like a month, and then I'd already planned to be out to California to visit. We had a conference in Reno, and then I was going to visit my best friend in San Diego, and Uncle Lenny happens to live in San Diego. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll meet up. So I go over there, I meet him and his wife are lovely. They're pulling out pictures. And then he's like, okay, so you have 2 full siblings. Your brother lives in Poland. I'm like, wow, Poland, why in Poland? He's like, oh, his wife is Polish. They have 2 kids. So I'm like, okay. So at this point, I go back to my friend's house and I'm like, Poland's far. I'm gonna reach out on Facebook Messenger to this guy. If she doesn't want to have anything to do with me, that's fine, but nobody's gonna be the gatekeeper for everybody in the family. So I sent him a message. I'm like, hey, Jack, this is kind of awkward. I don't know how to say it, but I just found out you're my brother. And he replies almost instantly, and he goes, what do you mean? And I said, I took a DNA test and I'm your sister. And he said, I knew my dad was a wild guy. I knew he was a ladies' man. He got around and he's going on. And I said, well, wait, there's more. And I said, your mom is also my mom. He's like, there is no way. And I said, I'm positive. And he said, my mom is a total prude. She didn't do anything but kiss my dad before they got married. I said, well, I am living proof that they did a little bit more than that, at least once. And, you know, she could still be a prude, but at least once he was very convincing before he shipped off to Vietnam. So I messaged back and forth with him till like 4 o'clock in the morning. And he was just like, well, he goes, in the middle of that, he said, well, I'm actually in California right now. I'm like, and he's like, yeah, I'm visiting my mom and dad. So this was not expected. They live in Orange County, like 2 hours away from San Diego. So he's like, I'm leaving in 2 days to go back to Poland, and I was coming back to Virginia in 2 days. So he's like, do you want to meet halfway and have coffee? So the next day. And so I literally wrote my dad a letter for him to give to him, because he was not, my mom was like, no way am I talking to her ever. And my dad was like, not like that adamant. So I walk into this coffee shop in Oceanside and I look at him and he goes, wow, you have our dad's eyes. And I'm like, we have the same eyes. And he goes, oh yeah, I have my dad's eyes too. Okay. So anyway, it was cool. I mean, it was just surreal. Like we hit it off really quickly. Sat there for like 3 hours. Then he went home and called me like 2 hours later, and he said, so my mom was out, my dad was sitting in his recliner, and I went up to him and I whispered, and he said, I know about Ann. And my dad said, who? He goes, my sister. I just met her. He said, you've never seen an old man come out of a recliner faster than he did. And he's pulling me outside and gave him, you know, he's like, I was like interrogated for 2 hours. And he goes, but he really wants to talk to me. So next time my mom's out, he's going to call. So this went on. I talked to him multiple times on the phone. My sister lived with my mom and dad. And so when my grandma, my mom, was carpooling, he would like call me in secret. So it was like I was having this phone affair with my father. But I did get a lot of information. So eventually, my sister still didn't know. Nobody wanted her to find out because she'd be mad because she got pregnant when she was 18. And I guess they gave her a lot of grief for it. So she was going to have to admit to her daughter that, you know, she also got pregnant out of wedlock. But eventually, you know how like Facebook tells you like people you may know? It just kept popping up with like family members. You may know this person, you may know this person. So all of a sudden, like one day I get like this friend request from, oh, let me back up. So my dad was married before and had 3 kids from his first marriage, who they had custody of. So I was born in May. They got married in October and got custody of the kids in February, and they were like 6, 5, and 3. So I get a message from or a friend request from my half brother. I'm like, and it was just like every day. It was just like, I was like, I told my husband, it's like the telephone game. Oh, this person knows, that person knows. My Aunt Ann calls, another aunt calls. So eventually my sister was like, who is this Ann that I keep seeing as a people you may know? And she's like friends with like half our family. And my uncle Lenny was like, I'm not saying anything. I'm not telling you. So I think my brother Jack that lived in Poland wound up telling her. So she walked outside, her mom was outside, and she's like, hey mom, and she's like, I know about Ann. Why aren't you telling me? And her mom like lost it, our mom, and she's like, she hugged her, and it was a lot, but I think once that happened, she was like, her secret was already out. So at that point, she was a little bit more relaxed. She still wasn't willing to really talk to me, but so this was like in October, early November. I had decided I was going to go to Poland and visit my brother because he had 2 little kids, and I'd never had a niece and nephew, and I've always wanted a niece and nephew, and they were like 6 and 8 and super cute. So I go over to Poland for Thanksgiving, and oh, well, we got to find that video. Hold on. I go over to Poland for Thanksgiving, and we're going to FaceTime. And just a second, there is a picture that was taken 5 minutes before we FaceTime. This will come back to this one. So my sister took this literally right before we called. So that was, you can just absolutely see how upset they are that she's going to see me and talk to me. And she said hi, and that was all that I got out of her that day. But it was more than I ever thought I was going to get out of her. And then my sister was coming out, her son is in the Army and is going to school in Virginia. So she came out in December and met her for the first time, which was great. And we got along really well. We're so much alike, it was almost unnerving because I'd never met anybody like me. And we were finishing each other's sentences the first night. And even our husbands were like, this is freaky. So she convinced her mom and dad that they had to meet me at least once. So then I go out there in January. And she wasn't there when I got there. My dad was there, she wasn't. Came in like an hour later, knowing when I was gonna get there. And she was just like stoked, like she was so stiff. And her sister wound up driving up from San Diego, and we sat there and talked. And she's like, do you hate, she finally was like, do you hate me? I'm like, no, why would I hate you? It's like, that's my biggest concern. I was always just terrified that you would hate me. And I'm like, I don't hate you. Like, I'm not mad. Like, you did what you had to do. Now, I might have said something a little bit different now that what's the new word we're saying? Adoptive consciousness instead of out of the fog. But at the time it was a good thing to do. But one of the first things she asked me was, do you like vegetables? Which is a pretty probably weird question for everybody else. And I'm like, no, I hate most vegetables. And she said, me too. Like, I just don't like them. I said, no, me either. And I was just like, when I was a child, my adopted mom was big on vegetables. Everybody had these vegetables. You couldn't leave the table until your vegetables were done. So it was an absolute battlefield every night until I was probably 13. Was me sitting at the table till bedtime, crying, her yelling. And I'm like, I wasn't a defiant brat. I just have genes that don't let me like vegetables. So I felt very vindicated in that. But then, I mean, so I went out, we were fortunate that we were in a position that I went out 7 times that first year I met them. I mean, it's far, I live outside of DC, so flying all the way to Virginia or California, but I did it. And I went on what my sister calls a cemetery tour. I went with my mom and dad to Wyoming and Nebraska, where they're from. We went and visited many living and dead relatives. I saw where they grew up. We went to no, like part of that. No. So that's my birth parents. Unwed. Okay, so we went to Scottsbluff, which is where they were, and showed me around. And then my mom said, we went parking on that road over there. And I said, what road? So she told me. So this road on the left, where my friend made the little sign that says Conception Lane, it's a little gravel road that leads to a farm that's not too far from a farm, where that is where I was conceived. So I'm like, not many people can go to the road, adoptees at least, can go to the road that they were conceived on. But we did. She's still embarrassed. I got her a rock and I like had engraved Conception Rock on it. And but we're good now. So, but back up, my dad, about 5 months after I found him, got diagnosed with terminal cancer. And that was hard. And he went in the hospital. It was 2020, COVID. He didn't have COVID, but nobody could go and see him. I had gone out and to talk to the doctor right before he went to the hospital, and then nobody could go in. And he was going downhill quickly. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to fly out. And I flew out, got a rental car. I walked in the house right when the phone rang, and it was his palliative care team. And I had asked like the week prior if they could bring him home on hospice, and nobody in my family was willing. Like, no, he's not on hospice. He's not ready for that. I'm like, okay. But I'm listening to the palliative care doctor, and I said, and she's on speaker, and I just said, can we bring him home on hospice? And she said, I'll have him there in 3 hours. So he was so sick and he was barely conscious. And I mean, we got hospice there. I think, I don't know if mad is the right word, but you know, they give you morphine when you are in excruciating pain. And my brother very much disagreed with the morphine because his dad's a tough SOB and he would never want to be on morphine. And I'm like, you do not want him to suffer. Like, he is dying. He is not going to come back from this. But so I'm talking to the nurses and I'm sitting there and I called my husband and I said, I'm literally making all the decisions. I'm talking about his medical care. Everybody else is falling apart. And I've been in his family 15 months and like, it's all falling on me to take care of everything. So, I mean, on one hand, that was nice that they trusted me. On the other hand, I've already done this with the parent. Like, I was not looking forward to a do-over. He did pass away a couple days later. I still am confident in my decision was right. I legally shouldn't have been able to make those decisions, but nobody asked me if I was adopted. So that's the thing. If you go to your birth parents, don't tell me you're adopted, because I don't know. You just say I'm their daughter. So then, my sister and mom came out here for my daughter's baby shower, which was awesome. I've been back there several times. My brother, came home every summer to he was a teacher in Poland and he would come and work in Denver. So we saw him in Denver last year. And then, on November 1st of this year, I get a phone call from his wife and she's hysterical. And I said, Anya, what's wrong? And she said, Jack's dead. I said, what? I had just talked to him like 2 days before that. And she's like, he's dead. You need to call everybody. So here I am now having to tell my sister and my mom that their brother and son has passed away. And I'm like, and then my sister-in-law's calling me back and I'm like talking to the police through her translating. And it turns out that he died by suicide. It was really rough dealing with Poland. They were in the middle of getting a divorce that would have been finalized the next week, but because they weren't divorced, his wife got to make all the decisions, which weren't necessarily, you know, decisions that we would have maybe made, but I arranged to get my sister and mom out here. We flew to Poland. Like, they were falling apart. They would not have made it to a funeral if it wasn't, you know, for my husband and I going above board to get them to Poland. So my niece and nephew are over there. They have nephew was born here. They went back when he was 15 months old. My niece was born in Poland. She's never been back to the States because their mom wouldn't come back and would never let my brother bring them because she was afraid he wouldn't return them. But I now have permission to go to Poland in July or August and get them for 2.5 weeks. So I'm going to go be the good aunt and show them around the United States of America that they very much want to come to. But once again, it's me. And then my brother's like, well, can you get him out to Colorado Springs? And, you know, I've got to get him to California to see everybody. So I'm like, all right. But so that's pretty much where we are today. I mean, I'm in a good place with my mom. I talk to her all the time. I talk to my sister almost every day. My half brother I talked to fairly recently. And then, like many families, as you do DNA tests, sometimes you get a little surprised. So in and amongst this, we find out that my oldest half sister is not my half sister. The dad that raised her, as far would say, her birth certificate father is not her father. So that was a shock. My family is very happy I'm in their life and very unhappy that she's found her paternal family. So I struggle with that a lot. That they get very angry that she goes and visits them. And I'm just like, how can you be okay with me being in your life? And my sister said, you know, my dad raised her. That was the only dad she knew. And I said, he didn't even know about her. And my dad raised me, and he was the only dad I knew. And our dad did know about me and didn't raise me. And it's just like the disconnect. So that's been really, I struggle with that pretty much every day. So I'm like, we just can't talk about this. My mom's upset. She calls them those people. My sister's like, she calls them their sister. I'm like, they are her sister. So, you know, it's good and it's complex and it sucks. And I'm just like, I think I figured out that I have like two families. I have one foot in this family and one foot in this family. And really the only family I belong to is my husband and my kids. And that's, I'll go through the pictures. So this was me when I was a baby. When we got my brother, so we look nothing alike. So this, he sent me this picture yesterday when he's in his beard. I told him he looked like Bad Santa. But so I was 11 and he was 9, and he's right now he's like 6'3" and 290 pounds. And I'm 5 foot if I stretch myself really tall. So this was the day I met my brother in Orange County the first time. When I met my sister and she came to DC. This is the first time we were all together. So she's 2.5 years younger than me and he's 5.5 years younger. And then this is my mom and dad. And then and this is the first time we went out there with my sister and my husband, my weird brother-in-law, my mom and dad. This is my half brother that lives in California. And my brother Jack that died, my sister, and then this is my other half brother, and Jack. And then so I lost both my brother and my dad within 5 years. And I feel very bad. And this is my niece and nephew. And then this is at my daughter's baby shower. This is my niece, my daughter, me, my other 2 daughters, my mom and my sister. And then a little serendipity, my mom was in college. She wanted to be a lawyer. And because she went away to secretary school, she became a secretary for her entire life, retired as a secretary. And my daughter was in law school and she just started crying. She's like, all I ever wanted to do was be a lawyer. So when she graduated 2 years ago, she was able to come to her to her graduation. And it meant, I think it meant more to those two than to anybody else that she was there, so she was super happy. Those were my family. No, those are just miscellaneous pictures of everything. This is when we went out to Poland for my brother's funeral. That was his wife. My mom and dad and my adopted mom and dad. All right, and that's all I got. So we got questions.